I'm going to tell you about something that will be the most interesting thing that you get out of this whole presentation. And before I tell it, I've got to ask you a question. This is an experiment. You have to answer, I'm going to ask a question. You have to respond within 1 nanosecond. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. So everybody knows what a nanosecond is, right? Más o menos. Okay. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and then you respond immediately. What is 1 plus 1?
2.
What's 2 plus 2?
4.
What do cows drink?
Milk.
Okay. Everybody does that. And the reason that you did this is because it says something. The reason I did this with you is it has something to do with the way the brain is organized. Your brain does not carry information in paragraphs and in outline form. It carries information in little bits and pieces. The reason that you said milk is because I said 2 major words to you, cows and drink. And when you think of cows, there's a bunch of things you associate with cows. And when you think of drink, there are a bunch of things associated with drink, but there's one thing that's associated with both, and that is milk. So, so what you see up here, this is a mind map. Every time I give a talk, every time I write an article, every time I do a book or something like this, I always do a brain dump to see what I know already. The mind map is a way of doing that. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's free versions on the web, and this is an example of this. And so my presentation is going to be based around that. There are a lot of problems out there. There's global warming, there's the whole Ukraine thing, and then there's the issue of getting better regulators. So what I want to talk about today is why we don't have good regulators and how at least one entity, one regulator is doing something about that. And so so let me just ask, how many of you dream at night about being a regulator? Raise your hand. Okay, I saw 2 people. I never did either. But I'll tell you a secret. The best job I ever had in my entire life was 2 years I spent at the CFTC running the Division of Market Oversight, which had about 100 lawyers, economists, and more normal people as well. And the point is that for me, it was just really interesting. It was challenging. It was one of these jobs where I couldn't wait to get to work every morning when I went in. And this is just something that dropped out of the sky. I never thought I would want to work there, but I did. So don't cross that out. But the problem with regulators in general, in fact, you know, or if you don't know, your bosses know at the places that you've been working, that one of the most important things in building a really good organization is people. You want to get really good people. Now, obviously, most of us think in terms of just getting skilled people, people that have certain skills. When in the regulatory world, there's another issue as well, and that is, really, like any other corporation or entity, you need to know something about all of the stakeholders. And in the case of a regulator, you need to know something about the industry that you're regulating. When I was at the CFTC, as I said, there were about 100 people in this division. I knew of only one person out of 100 who had a background working in the industry before they came to the CFTC. Most people take the opposite path. What they do is that they might go to work for the SEC. This is a very popular thing. You go to work for the SEC first. You'll learn the laws and the regs and all these kinds of things. And then you'll go out and you will actually make money by working for a big law firm or running an exchange, right, or something like that. So because we don't have that, we've made lots of mistakes there are a lot of mistakes that have been made in regulation. There are two basic mistakes you can make. It's like type 1, type 2 error to some extent. The first mistake you can make is not pass a regulation when a regulation is really needed to preserve market integrity. But the more common one is when you pass a regulation that is stupid or is costly or just is unclear. You know, in other words, there are lots of regulations out there that are not good. And typically, this is over-regulation. I mean, over-regulation might describe that in some sense. And it's because you don't know the industry itself. So the CFTC has something they've been doing for a while. I don't know that it always works, but they said, look, they agreed that they didn't really understand all the industries that they were dealing with and that they were regulating. So they said, let's have some advisory committees that we'll put together that will inform us about important issues so that we can create good policy. Congress writes laws. Regulators implement those laws by writing regulations. So the laws are set. And so what's the most recent, really important financial law that's been passed? Somebody's got to get this. Dodd-Frank. Everybody knows about that. And the fact that you were coming of age during that, make sure that you study this, you really understand it, and you come away with an idea of how this really happened and why it happened, how the regulation got created. And this regulation, like every regulation, is an over-regulation, just like Sarbanes-Oxley was an over-regulation, just like after the crash of Glass-Steagall was to some extent an over-regulation. And so we will continue throughout, as long as we're on this planet, or I don't know where else we might be going, but we're going to cycle between over-regulation and under-regulation, and then there'll be a crisis again, and we'll have to do something about it. So what I'd like to do is just say a couple words about CFTC has 5 advisory committees: agriculture, global markets, technology, energy, and CFTC SEC, which was important when they were trying to deal with Dodd-Frank and all those kinds of things. What is the most disruptive force in changing market structures today? Anybody? Exactly. It's technology. Technology has turned everything upside down. And I'll tell you, from my own point of view, because I went to work for the CME before your parents were born, I think, back in 1979. And at that time, everything was traded on floors, and there were all kinds of regulations and rules, including exactly the clothes that you could wear. Some of you may trade on your own, and I know you're sitting in your pajamas, or even worse than that, behind screens. There used to be rules about how close the tie had to be to your neck, you know, at the CME. But the point is that at that time when I joined, if you wanted to trade one contract, there were brokerage firms that would do that for you for $100 per contract. Today, it's a matter of a few bucks to trade one contract. There is transparency today that there wasn't before. So no matter how much this issue of high-frequency trading, and that's a really big deal, no matter how bad, there are cases where high-frequency trading has created problems. Despite that, the era in which you live right now is much, much better for customers than it's ever been before. So this Technology Advisory Committee, TAC, is the thing that was created in order to deal with this. The membership is really interesting. It's got the COO of the CME, the CEO of ICE, executives from BlackRock, from Goldman Sachs, from a bunch of the big trading firms. Bloomberg is there, several other regulatory entities, Tab Group, Larry Tab from the Tab Group. So it's a really interesting group. In fact, including, how many of you have read Flash Boys? Okay, how many of you have not read Flash Boys? You really should read that book and then talk to somebody who's in the industry. doing high-frequency trading, because it is a really easy book to read. It's well written, and all the people I've talked with, even those in the industry, have all come away learning something from that. And my point is, one of the major characters in Flash Boys is Brad Kachiyama. And so he is now on this advisory committee. In fact, I should say that John Lothian and myself are both on this committee. And you can say later whether you think it's a good committee or not. But I think it has really done incredible stuff for informing the CFTC and how they should go forward with all kinds of things. I know that I'm out of time. And what I was going to I would just mention in closing is that there are a number of different issues that the Technology Advisory Committee dealt with. One of them is this issue of high-frequency trading, which came out of the flash crash and a number of other things. If you don't know the flash crash, that's something that you all should know as part of your financial literacy. And the second thing is, and this is something that is a little more technical, it actually gets more into this financial safeguards in the industry. But until a few years ago, the futures industry in the US was characterized by the fact that there had never been a loss of customer funds because of trading losses on the other side. And one of the features that makes that happen is this thing called segregation of funds, which means that if you're a brokerage firm and you trade for yourself and you trade for your customers, the customer money has to be segregated, has to be separated from the money that you're trading with. There were two cases in which that was violated. One of them was Peregrine Financial. Is it? Pardon? Yeah. Group. Thank you. And this is a case. This is one of the most embarrassing things, I think, to everybody involved. This was a case where the head of that organization was sending in on a daily basis fake reports from the bank saying how much money was in the customer funds and doing it in a way that it looked like it was coming from the bank. The second and the much bigger one is MF Global. And this is a case where the CEO of MF Global took very large bets on European bonds and basically got to a situation where he needed money. And somehow, I don't know that it's all clear yet, money was taken out of customer funds and used in order to margin those other products that the organization itself had. And there was huge losses in that case. In any event, so bottom line to this is that it is the nature of regulation, at least in the United States, that most regulators don't know much about the industry. They haven't worked in the industry, so it's hard for them to know exactly what they should be writing in regulations and whatnot. But I think that these committees, like the Technology Advisory Committee, if it is actually used effectively and attended by the commissioners of the CFTC, which most TAC meetings were, I think that can go a long way towards solving that problem. Thanks.